the countdown.
Mm-hmm.
We should always have the countdown.
I'm not sure if our mics are hot or not.
That's okay.
uh,
People can just get a behind the scenes, look. But yes, I
it's okay
believe in the
unless one of us
countdown.
curses. So
Well,
no,
just
the countdown's always good.
always assume that the mic is live, and always assume it's going in print. That's the whole thing.
That's the way you do it. Here we go. Orange blue today. That's right, everybody. It is orange and blue today. Orange and blue today, presented by Sean Ponda, Cecil Lammy, Andrew Mason, with a case of the Mondays. But I guess we got Thursday on the mind, Mace, because the word is out. Thursday, May 11th, a schedule release for the Denver Broncos and, of course, everyone across the National Football League.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, it's always kind of comical because we've known who the Broncos are going to play for a while. We literally know 14 of the Broncos' 17 opponents for 2025 and beyond, right? Because it's set by your division placement and the rotation. We only have 3 games that are subject to uh, where you finished the year before. So it's always kind of funny to me. We make a big deal out of this, but you know what? It does matter. Like it's the order in which the games happen. We know the who, we've known the where. We're going to find out the when. That does matter in terms of how we end up perceiving this season and what is to come. Quite frankly, because if you have a fairly benign start to the season, there's a chance to get some momentum. If you look at the schedule release and see uh, opening with Kansas City and then Kansas City and then Buffalo and then Miami in the first 3 weeks, you might be like, oh my gosh, that's terrible, right? So it does matter, but I think also selfishly for me, Cease, I can plan things. I feel like I can't really plan the next few months of my life until the schedule comes out.
Right.
And so finally, like, okay, now we can start putting things together, and we can even learn the preseason as well. And maybe we'll find out the possibilities for the Broncos have joint practices, because that often depends on who you draw in the preseason as well. And I think the Broncos would want to have at least one joint practice this year.
Yeah, I would love that. Joint practices where you can see stuff happen. Of course, with Sean Payton, we're going to see stuff happen anyway. Football's back, and it feels like it anyway. It'd just be nice if we get out there soon enough. But on schedule release, Mace, I look for a couple of things. First and foremost, where's the bye at? That's what I'm looking at. All right. Is it a
Players look at
comfortable
that
bye?
first.
Is it way too early in the season? Later in the season, I don't necessarily mind, but like there's a sweet spot for the bye. So I look at that. And then from a fantasy football perspective, I'm looking at the fantasy playoffs. So what's the last month of the season? You got road games. Are they in the cold? Are you at home? Do you have easy opponents? And I do that for all the teams, not just the Broncos. But for me, for Denver, it's where's the bye at? And then for the rest of the league, it's like, okay, where are those juicy matchups I can take advantage of in my fantasy league?
Yeah, the funny thing is about the bye week. A lot of people will tell you they like it right in the middle of the regular season, which back in the 16-game schedule would be 8 games by 8 games. That was perfect. But for me, I kind of look at the whole slog from the start of training camp until the second week in January, as far as how long the season goes. And so with that 18-week season, then by at the end of the preseason, 3 weeks and then 2 weeks. So it's 24 weeks. And so honestly, I say give me the bye halfway through that entire process, not halfway through the regular season. So I'm okay if you tell me, okay, the bye is going to be in week 6, because it's not the halfway point of the regular season, but it's the halfway point of the entire thing if you go back to the start of training camp, right? So everyone prefers something different. And that's where I do think there is a possibility of getting that bye too late. And we saw some teams have some late buys. Weren't there at least one or two teams last year that had a week 13, week 14 bye
Oh
toward
yeah,
the
yeah.
end?
Seemingly when
So it does
everybody's
happen.
done, and they still have
Yeah.
buys. So
Yeah,
the NFL's a
it
little
does happen.
inconsistent with that. I'm also looking at divisional opponents. And then, Mace, of course, what'll drive the needle for sports radio. How many primetime games are they getting? I'm actually not expecting a whole lot, but it is Sean Payton. It is a draw. It is an attraction. And the Broncos, as down as they've been, there'll still be that draw, especially if they're winning some games, especially if they look better. Denver fans, they'll be right back, baby.
Yeah, I think if I were guessing, Cease, I'd say we'll see 3 primetime games that are set, and then the possibility of at least one more. And I'm not talking about the Sunday night flex, which is pretty much always in play as you get through the balance of the season. I'm talking about how now we see flexibility on those games that go to Saturday towards the end of the season. We see like a couple of Saturday games in Week 18. Broncos were in one of them, of course, back in the 2021 season. Vic Fangio's last game was one that was bumped to Saturday for a national window there on ESPN and ABC. So I think we'll see 3 prime that are maybe not prime time. Let me rephrase that: 3 standalone games, and I think it'll be 2 primetime games, one. And I'm just going to call my shot here. I think the Broncos will play the early game on Thanksgiving against the Detroit Lions, which is something that they haven't done in a while. There was a time when the Broncos playing Detroit on Thanksgiving was a semi-regular occurrence. It happened in 1974. It happened in 1978. It happened in 1990. So I'm going to call my shot and say the Broncos play the Lions early on Thanksgiving. They have 2 more primetime games. And then there's a distinct possibility of a couple of more games, 1 or 2 games that get flexed into their own windows. So that's and that gives the Broncos a chance to play their way into more appearances. And if they have a decent season, they get off to a decent start, we could be talking about 5 games that the Broncos have nationally. I think that would be pretty appropriate.
Well, we know that Sean Payton's going to move the needle when he's out there, so people will jump back on board with the Broncos. The last time they played Thanksgiving was Greasy the quarterback. Am I misremembering that?
No. The last time they played on Thanksgiving was actually it was a primetime game in 2009. Josh McDaniels was there. It was where he was caught with the hot mic on the sideline.
Oh,
castigating his offensive
NFL
lineman.
Network came back from that. They went to commercial. They come back with Josh McDaniels dropping an MF bomb on TV.
Yes. Yeah,
to Tyler. He was yelling at Tyler. Of course he was yelling at Tyler.
Oh gosh. And then the Broncos 4 years earlier, because you were referencing the 2001 game in Dallas at Texas Stadium. They played on Thanksgiving in 2005 at Texas Stadium. That was the Champ Bailey pick 6, Ron Dayne overtime gallop to set up Jason Elam's game-winning field goal against the Bill Parcells-led Dallas Cowboys, a 24-21 game. So,
wow. There are just some of those running backs like Ron Dayne that you think back like, oh, yeah, they were Broncos.
Yeah.
A lot of people say Tony Dorsett. Okay, I get that. But for me, like Ron Dayne being a Bronco, Garrison Hurst being a Bronco, like there's a few names you come along the way and you're like, oh, yeah, I forgot he was a Bronco.
Well, the other thing is, can you tell me what Ron Dayne and Tony Dorsett have in common besides being Broncos?
Besides being Broncos, Heisman Trophy?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
They both won the Heisman. Very short list of Broncos players who won the Heisman Trophy when they were in college.
Right. Timmy is the other one. And wow, that's almost about it, right? I
think that's it. I mean, if we're gonna go all fictional here, I don't think Gavin Gray, the gray ghost of everybody's All-American fame, I don't think he won the Heisman, of course, but we know in the movie that he eventually played for the Broncos,
right?
As he closed his career. Oh man.
Okay. Schedule release Thursday, and we'll have leaks during the day. So
not just leaks. Happen. We're gonna have some games announced Wednesday. Like it.
Yes.
I break this down at denversports.com. The league gives their broadcast partners the chance to announce certain games early. So we may know a primetime game or two for the Broncos on Wednesday rather than Thursday. They also announce all the international games on Wednesday as well. Realistically, I think the only possibility there for the Broncos could be if you're talking about Mexico City, if that comes to pass. But we'll learn the international games Wednesday. We'll learn some select prime time games and also some key daytime matchups as well, because Fox and CBS will reveal them on their morning shows, and NBC and ESPN, ABC will drop some games on their morning shows as well. So we're gonna have a few. We're gonna have a few that aren't leaks, and then throughout the day on Thursday, there's always a drip, drip, drip. I anticipate, Cease, that you and I, by the time we do this show on Thursday afternoon, we may have the schedule pretty well put together for the most part, I think.
Yeah, which leads me to go. I have a public appearance on Thursday, so I'll be off that day. And I'm like, damn it. The day we have not that we won't have much to talk about on Friday, of course. We always got something. We always have something to say, Mace, even if it's a little thin for Broncos news.
Well, I'm gonna be writing something about the schedule for probably the 2.5 weeks after it comes out, because I'm gonna go through it game by game and kind of give a first preview of that. That's what we're doing here in the Valley of Broncos news. Although in the Valley of Broncos news, we actually came across a little fertile patch today.
Yes, we did.
Which leads us to actual Broncos news beyond looking at the schedule coming out, and that is Kareem Jackson being back in a Bronco uniform.
Yep, you wrote about it at denversports.com. Kareem Jackson is back. He was on NFL Network, let's say a month ago or so, talking about how he'd like to go to a championship level team. We love and appreciate the Broncos. I don't think they're going to win a championship this year. So Kareem Hunt is back, and this says what for the safeties? I mean, because they just added J.L. Skinner. We're talking about him as potential sleeper, and we love Caden Stearns, and can he stay healthy? And P.J. Locke is back. Like, they got a bunch of safeties, man. They got a bunch of guys that can play.
Yeah, but the thing is, you just went through a lot of safeties who aren't known commodities or aren't necessarily reliable in starting roles, or have not proven that reliability, right? Because Caden Stearns missed 12 games last year with a hip injury, didn't play after the 5th game of the season. He's had some injury strike him in each of his last 4 seasons, going back to University of Texas. PJ Locke is a pretty good sub-package guy, but you don't know if he can step in and handle the every down safety role on a regular basis. JL Skinner, hey, there's a lot of hopes for JL Skinner. He's also a 6th round pick. So you can't go in to the year with your planning and saying, all right, we're going to rely on this dude who's a 6th round pick to be our safety. That if he blossoms and earns that role, great, roll with it. But that's not your primary plan. And so basically, with all those possibilities, there's sort of an if, but maybe there's a qualifier involved. With Kareem Jackson, he actually was one of 2 defensive players who started every game last year. Alex Singleton played every game, but he didn't start every game. So for all the injuries you had, you only had few guys that were out there every game. Singleton, Kareem Jackson, Pat Surtain II. Those were the guys playing extensively pretty much every game. So here you have a player going into year 14 who seems to be more durable than he's ever been. Has he lost a step? Yeah, it's fair to say that he doesn't have the burst that he once had, but he's a good locker room presence. If you have to start Kareem Jackson, it's not the worst thing in the world. Like you know that he's going to play to the best of his ability. It's just a question of what that ability is here as he just turned 35 last month.
Yeah, and it's incredible, something that we can certainly praise Kareem Jackson for, because that longevity is outstanding. And to still be playing at a fairly decent level, like you're and the nice thing is, because we talk about JL Skinner, Skinner's a linebacker to me. Like, so he's like an immovable piece. Like, okay, so now Kareem Jackson gives you that in the box player. and your other players are versatile, and your other players, Caden Stearns has a ton of upside, can't stay healthy. Like, you have to be prepared for that. It's what I say when I talk about pass rushers. But, like, at the safety position, yeah, I love Skinner as a linebacker, and he's maneuverable. Kareem Jackson, okay, maybe he's not what he used to be, Mace, but you know what you're going to get, and what you're going to get you can work with.
Right. And if all else fails, if Caden Stearns fails to launch, can't stay healthy, if PJ Locke can't step up, if JL Skinner's not ready, you know what? You start Kareem Jackson. You play to his strengths. You have him attacking in the box, have Justin Simmons working more of that center field type role, and then you go from there. You adapt to that. Every team, even the greatest of teams, have spots where they're not elite level in terms of the player that they're starting. It's okay. You can get by with some of those types of players. Kareem Jackson does bring a lot of intangibles. He is an excellent locker room presence, guys. He's one of those players that is pretty much universally respected in that room as well.
Right.
And that has some value too. And also on a team that's had so many changes this year, to be able to look at the defensive backfield and say, all right, this unit is pretty much going to look the way it did last year, because there's a good chance your starting safeties are K-Jack and Justin Simmons, and your corners are going to be Pat Surtain, Damari Mathis, K'Waun Williams in the slot. The fact that you can look at that unit and say, it may well be the same guys that you had in the lineup last year with the same position coach that you had last year in Christian Parker. With so much changing on the roster, you need to have some stability in some spots, and bring K-Jack back, I think, helps accomplish that in the secondary, and allows the secondary to be a unit that you're building around on the defensive side.
Russian cover. And where Rush has some questions, hopefully we get some real good answers. Cover. Yeah. Whoa, you got a bunch of answers. Like, you got a bunch of different options to cover there. I was asked this on the Players Club last week, and I'll ask you the same question, Mace, because I think it was Big O, asked me about Dalton Risner. Like, hey, the streets are pretty cold. When you get out there, Kareem Jackson, streets are pretty cold for him. He did want to go to a championship contender. Nobody like the Bills or the Chiefs said yes to him. So it's like, okay, what other Bronco would have some cold streets if they were in a place where they were on, as a free agent? And so it got me to think, and I actually said Garrett Bowles, which is much controversial, but whatever. So, like, yeah, I think it goes back to this roster was looked at by the last regime, and the rest of the NFL looks at some of the pieces on this roster, including a Dalton Risner, including a Kareem Jackson, and think, well, we can do better.
Well, look at the relatively tepid interest in Courtland Sutton on the trade market, right?
Right.
And one of the reasons why Courtland Sutton is a Denver Bronco is because the Broncos didn't find an offer that reflected what they felt Courtland Sutton was worth. There were discussions with the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens didn't meet the Broncos' asking price. So look, one of the things that naturally happens when you're around a team is that sometimes you don't have a true sense of the value. You either overvalue or undervalue. If the player is struggling, sometimes you tend to undervalue. If the player is succeeding, sometimes you can overvalue in the moment. It works both ways. And so it doesn't surprise me that you see that was relatively tepid interest for Dalton Risner, Courtland Sutton. I think you could kind of go down the list of some others if they were on the market. You mentioned Garrett Bowles. I mean, hypothetically, what would the interest in Russell Wilson be if he were on the market?
That's the other one I was thinking of. I said Bowles, but it was one of those, like, I get off the air and I'm like, I should have said Russell Wilson. Because that, one, it's interesting, and two, I think it's factual. Like, after last year, and that's where, like, based on this year, and it goes back to our previous conversation, like, where's the line to keep Russ? Because I think he'll be slightly above average, and I'd still want to move on from him if he's slightly above average. Like, and I don't think he's going to be superstar, 50 touchdowns, 40 touchdowns, whatever. But, like, okay, where's Russell Wilson's career rehabilitation, as I stumble over that word, Mace? If he is only slightly above average this year and is released by the Broncos, well, I don't know a lot of starting jobs will be out there for him.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's something interesting that was written today in The Athletic. It was about Desmond Ritter and the Falcons, okay? Because, first of all, the question I was going to ask you is if you're the Falcons, would you rather ride with Desmond Ritter or would you rather bring in Russell Wilson? I believe the Falcons' answer would be they're going to ride with Desmond Ritter rather than bring in Russell Wilson, which again reflects the level of interest. But like with some teams, we see paying exorbitant prices, including the Broncos for a quarterback. I mean, we see the Jalen Hurts contract. We know about the Deshaun Watson contract and the Kyler Murray contract. There's a question of whether it's going to be worth it to have those kind of numbers if the QB isn't elite. If you're getting elite money for not elite production, it's something that really hamstrings your salary cap. But anyway, in The Athletic, it was about Desmond Ritter. I'm going to read the excerpt. This is very much a generalization. If we assume that 20% of the QBs in this league are difference makers and another 20% are not good, that leaves 60% of the league playing with a guy who is good enough in the right circumstances. You can waste a lot of time and energy trying to get a guy you think is in that first 20%. And teams such as the Falcons are probably thinking about getting off that train and seeing what they can do with a guy in the 60%. And then on top of that, for the Falcons, it's not mentioned there, but this matters. A guy in maybe he's in that 60% and he's cost controlled, right?
Yeah.
You look at the fact that it took a while, but the Packers finally reached the point where they were going to roll with Jordan Love. And then they added another year to his contract. And it's a pretty reasonable number for 2024 for Jordan Love, right? Yeah. I think it's like $22 million. I know that sounds like a lot. That's not much more than the Broncos paid Joe Flacco, and that would have been 5 years earlier by the time that number kicks in contractually. So that's actually fairly mid-tier in terms of what you'd be paying a quarterback. It doesn't break your bank in terms of overall roster management. And so it probably makes sense for the Packers to put themselves in that position and say, okay, we're going to give him 2 years and see where he is. And perhaps if he's not elite, you're moving on. But maybe if he is pretty good, you try to negotiate a contract that reflects being pretty good, which would be somewhere in the $20-some million a year range. That middle ground that teams have generally avoided might start looking a little more attractive than the kind of contract with which the Broncos are saddled right now for Russell Wilson.
Yeah, it's a pendulum. When we see the contracts get a little out of whack, then I'm surprised we haven't seen more Colin Kaepernick, Andy Dalton contracts. Mm-hmm. Those nice little check in with me every 2 years type of thing.
Yeah.
And if you're doing good, we'll continue on. So I think we will see some of that. Mace, I've often said there's 12 quarterbacks that they've figured it out, and there's 20 teams that are kidding themselves. I would honestly include the Broncos in the kidding themselves category. But Pat Surtain, I'm writing about it today for DenverSports.com. Pat Surtain was on Good Morning Football, and they'd had their tiers. Mm-hmm. Who was that homeboy that does the power running? Used to be on Romy. Jim Rome. Why am I forgetting his name? Anyway,
Kyle Brandt,
yeah. So he did his quarterback tiers. Russell Wilson was a 4th tier.
I saw that.
And Pat Surtain, being the good, good teammate, he's like, those first 4 tiers, pretty good. I'm like, all right, Pat, I get you. All right.
But that 4th tier, I mean, wasn't he it wasn't Russell Wilson on the same tier as because it was AFC quarterbacks, right?
I believe so,
NFC?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Was it that 4th tier? Didn't they have him above Trevor Lawrence? Wasn't T-Law 5th tier?
Maybe. I thought he was above Jimmy Garoppolo or something.
Yeah, because didn't Jimmy G have a tier onto himself?
That might have been, yeah.
The
tier 5, I think.
Yeah, but remember, Trevor Lawrence actually had a tweet last week about where he ranked, and I thought, and I agreed, I think Lawrence was below Russell Wilson on the tiers, and I'm like, okay. I guess you can say Trevor Lawrence still has to prove himself. I thought he pretty well proved himself overcoming a bad half and playing a great half and then playing really well when the Jaguars nearly went to Kansas City and beat the Chiefs.
Right.
Could have easily beaten the Chiefs. And Lawrence was a reason why they had a chance to win that game. So I personally think Trevor Lawrence has arrived already. but we'll see. He's gonna
Well,
have
I personally
he might have
think
to run for his life a little bit more this year.
the tier thing for me, Mace, is just like, who would you prefer? And all
Yeah.
of us would prefer Trevor Lawrence
Yeah.
over Russell Wilson. Like, there's no doubt.
And that's not just a function of contract or even age. I think Trevor Lawrence is probably a better quarterback right now. If you took all the other ancillary factors out of it, I think T-Law is a better QB.
All right. It is Orange and Blue today, presented by Sean Ponda.
Yeah, some think Russ is going to be great this year. Hey, I hope he is. I hope he figures it out.
Yeah, Jody had a couple of questions about pass rushers, too. We got plenty of time to get to all that. But now, next and finally, a topic that has drawn the ire of one Andrew Mason, but Jeremy Fowler, who does good work for ESPN.com, had put the Broncos as a team to watch when it comes to Kareem Hunt. Speaking of streets being cold, like Kareem Hunt's right there. But when I texted you about this topic, Mace, you're like, oh, well, we can talk about it, but God, you're like Michael Scott in The Office, like, please, God, no.
I probably have the reaction a lot of teams, front offices, and perhaps ownership and PR staffs would have, because some things linger. What we should say you do here, as the Bobs would say. Some things linger. The video of a domestic violence incident lingers. It shouldn't take video to make you not want a player because of that in the background, in their background. But for me, that's what that's what it is. We know about this. We know about this incident that he had. I simply think it would be a PR nightmare for the Broncos to do that. We're talking about running backs here. Give me Ezekiel Elliott if you're gonna go the veteran reclamation route. Give me somebody who does not have this extrinsic baggage. I will admit, it's not a football thing for me. It's the non-football stuff that would cause me, if it were my team, to say hard pass.
Right. And why does it need video evidence? Because it's the NFL. We really care. Wait, video? Oh, we care more now.
Yeah, it shouldn't take that. A police.
Ray Rice had the longest suspension of anybody for domestic violence in the NFL. It was 2 games until the video came out. Then he never played again. So the NFL, much like every large corporation, they're like, hey, money. Oh, what? We're supposed to care? Okay, now we care. Yeah. So, yeah, that's what happened then. People had brought up Dalvin Cook. Well, Dalvin Cook had charges from Florida State about starving puppies, dogfighting. So, there were plenty of people in the scouting community that said, hey, get him away from Miami. Get him out of that situation. Because I know people would say, he could go to the Dolphins. And I'm like, there are plenty of people in the league that are like, get Dalvin Cook out of Miami and he'll be okay. Dalvin Cook has stayed out of trouble. And this is all public record, by the way.
And Kareem Hunt has stayed out of trouble. I'll say that.
Yes, Kareem Hunt has stayed out of trouble. So has Dalvin Cook. But if we're going to talk about everything, we're going to talk about that, because there are some concerns that, Dalvin Cook had in those charges that are all public record from Florida State. Yeah. And then, of course, Kareem Hunt, we've all seen the horrific video from his domestic violence incident a few years ago. Yeah,
and I mean, if we make the football argument, he's fine. I mean, he doesn't have the explosiveness that he had as a rookie. He has never approached what he was in Kansas City in terms of being a productive running back. That's just the thing there. But you are talking about part of a running back collective rather than somebody who's carrying the load. From a football perspective, at a prove it type contract, why not? For when you add the other stuff into it, I simply would just look in another direction. But the fact is that we're having this conversation because maybe the Broncos aren't done at running back just yet. Now, I think they want to get a good look at Samaje Perine here over the next few weeks when they actually get on the field and start running the offense in phase 3 of OTAs, which kicks in, I believe, the first day of phase 3 is 2 weeks from tomorrow. So you'll start getting an idea how guys are looking. I think I I think you don't have to do that. And the other thing to consider, Cease, is this. Broncos got Latavius Murray last year in October,
Right.
and he was on a practice squad. Running backs are fairly fungible assets, and if you need one, you can find one who's reasonably productive.
Always.
So
where's Marlon Mack, right?
right, Marlon Mack's out there. You can go get Marlon Mack and he's going to be decent for you. So personally, I would prefer to just plug P Ryan in there. Maybe even you get a look at guys that are in your midst. You know, get a look at Demaria Crockett coming back from an ACL injury, right? See what he's still got in the tank. I think you cycle through. You know, you got that Tyler Padilla in the mix as well. He had a touchdown in Week 18 last season. I think you cycle through what you got and see what you got in there with these younger backs, including the 2 undrafted guys that you brought in from FCS and Division II. I think you do that before you start sifting through the scratch and dent pile of veteran running backs, knowing you're going to be able to find somebody.
There's always somebody out there. And Jaleel McLaughlin, everybody. Jaleel McLaughlin. Talking to Matt Waldman, author of the Rookie Scouting Portfolio. He said he's Philip Lindsay that can catch.
Yeah, this guy, I think this guy can make the team. He's
easily.
He and Incoom are if I were putting two guys right now to say I'm going to stake my claim to these two being on the 53, the McLaughlin and Incoom.
You got to do it like the two Bobs, though. Like, I'll give you 2 UDFAs that'll make the final roster. How about
that would have been better for a
social you?
All right. Maybe I should do it for a social media clip. I'll give you 2 undrafted free agents who make the 53-player roster. That's Jaleel McLaughlin and Thomas Incoom.
Clip.
There. See? Clip. There we go. We got our clip.
We're getting the clips. We're back on Twitter. Oh, my God.
That's what it's all about. Like a lot of these shows exist just to create social media clips now. That's the way it is in this business.
Yeah.
Kind of depressing, but it is what it is.
We're some chatty blankety blankers. We are Orange Blue today, presented by Champ Honda. He is Andrew Mason. And I want you to do this. I want you to follow him on Twitter at Mace Denver. I am at Cecil Lammy and looking for our finale, our close here, because we got our stuff back, Mace. So we can start doing stuff like this again. See?
Yes, I like it. Yay!
Yay! We got stuff back. Yay! We're thinking. See, that's the way to think.
We're just using them all right now, huh? Yep. So we're just gonna play the hits.
Yeah,
yes.
Right there. You love them all. Have it? Huh?
Yes.
No.
Oh.
Yeah. There you go.
All we need is that blinking guy, like, or
perfection. That's what it is.
Or Homer Simpson going back into the bushes or something. You know.
Ooh, I have that one. I'll have to put it. I'll put it on there. Either way.
Yeah.
He's Mace. I'm Cease. OBT is BFD, and we appreciate you. Be safe. Be kind. Know that you're appreciated. Stay tuned, and as always, please, would you stay frosty.